Good day and welcome to Inspiring Content Strategy for Energy Utilities. My name is Jake Damari and I am the Director of Marketing at Connective DX. Today I am very pleased to introduce our Director of Content Strategy, Derek Phillips, who is going to share some insight into how J.D. Power's top-ranked energy companies create exceptional content. But before I turn it over to Derek, I'd like to mention a few things. Attendees are in listen-only mode, but we are quite interested in your questions, so please submit them anytime through the GoToWebinar Q&A interface, and we'll take a couple of breaks to answer them. Questions can also be asked via the chat function. Today's session is being recorded, and all of you will receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording on YouTube after it's completed. So, once again, welcome and thank you for attending, and with that, I'd like to turn it over to Derek.
Great, thanks, Jake. Hello, everybody. I'm Derek Phillips. I'm the Director of Content Strategy at Connective DX, and I wanted to take some time here today and talk about the practice of content strategy and how some of the processes and tips that we create as a part of a content strategy can really be applied in the utilities industry, ultimately to increase your customer satisfaction rankings. And so that's the core of what we're talking about today. And we're going to start with a headline, right? So this is the headline from J.D. Power. Residential electric utility customer satisfaction increases for 7th consecutive year, driven by proactive communication. That's important, but let's dig a little bit deeper here. Proactive communications, primarily delivered through digital channels such as email, text message, or social media posts, are having a significant positive impact on residential electric utility customer satisfaction. Power outages are going to happen. The more proactive electric utilities are in clearly communicating information about the cause, anticipated duration, and repair of an outage, the more satisfied their customers will be with their overall service. So that's a mouthful. Let's focus on the really important parts, right? Proactive communications are having a significant positive impact on residential electric utility customer satisfaction. The more proactive electric utilities are in clearly communicating information, the more satisfied their customers will be with their overall service. So yes, it's important to communicate about outages. We all know that. That tends to be where a lot of our customers focus as well, especially when there are outages. But the real takeaway here is that when we're proactive in those communications, when we're contextual to the customer's experience, they have a higher satisfaction with their overall service. So it's really about being clear and concise in our communication, which is easier said than done. It seems very simple. The concept of being clear and concise seems like a very simple thing to do until we start to dig into our competing interests with our different lines of business. We have different pet projects going on. Things get cluttered very easily. From the agency side of things, we often will hear from new clients that they want the Apple experience, the very clean, spare experience, and that's great, and we understand why they want that. But how Apple gets that, and how other companies like Apple get that very focused experience, is by making hard decisions on what they're going to promote at different times and how they're going to use the space that they have to work with, which is all about having a content strategy. So why listen to me? Like, what do I know about all this stuff? Well, I've been in the industry for quite a while, since 1999, kind of. That was my first agency job, was 1999, and my title at the time was copy analyst, which was really the beginning of content strategy. It's where we really started to focus on how we're using digital channels to communicate with our customers and ensuring that we have some idea of what it is they want to know from us, so that we can then design the right experience for them. And that, for me, started in 1999. Since then, I've been a content strategist, digital strategist, and then the director of content strategy with several agencies over the last 10, 12 years or so. I also have deep experience in regulated industries, including utilities. I've been a part of the team. I've led teams in the redesign and replatforming of 5 or 6 utilities now, specifically with Connective DX. And so I've got some experience in the field. And then I have a focus on digital strategy and customer experience. Yes, I have some marketing experience in my past as well, but really where my passion is and my focus is, and the focus of Connective DX is on the customer experience. So we're looking for ways that we can make a more positive experience for our customers. And we're going to talk about why that's a business value in just a second here. But it's also important for me to mention that I am a dedicated Portland Timbers fan, season ticket holder forever. Okay, content is really at the center of our design process here at Connective DX. It's the information our customers are seeking out. That is the content of the site. The design should be there to support that information, should be there to support the content. So design is really important. It helps to set the tone of our brand, but if it's not there in support of the information that we're providing, which is the reason people come to our websites in the first place, then it's really decoration, not design. And the reality is customers will forgive inelegant design if the content is right. And my two favorite examples are Craigslist, what we see here, and Wikipedia, which are very focused on their content and very popular websites that don't necessarily have the most flashy design. And so if we can get the content part of this process right and support it with elegant design, now we're talking about creating really world-class experiences. And the last point here is that content's not a thing, it's a process. It's a system, and if it's done correctly, it's a scalable system that's flexible. And we'll talk about what that really looks like. So we believe that that companies that are loved win, right? And we, again, do a lot of work with utilities, and that extends to our utility customers. And so when we did some work with a local utility in Portland, we saw results right away, both from the customers themselves who were talking about the redesign, but also we had measurable business results here. We saw a 78-point gain in PGE's ranking in the J.D. Power Electrical Utility Residential Customer Satisfaction Study, which is a mouthful, but jumping all the way to number 2 of ranked utility websites up out of 137. And so when we apply this methodology, we see real business return on that. And that's why I wanted to take the time today to kind of talk to you about what are the best practices that we can put in place, because things have changed, right? There's disruption in the industry. And, kind of when we think about this, it's easy to think that utilities don't really have customers. They have users, right? There's not really a market to shop for power yet. But the way the service is delivered and experience is rapidly changing. And that's because the expectation of our customers is rapidly changing. And they don't see themselves necessarily as customers without or with a choice yet, but they know, and they instinctively know that change is coming, that disruption comes to all industries. We can look at the taxi industry. For the longest time, for you to get an on-demand car, the taxi was it. Yes, you could rent a town car, but really the taxis owned that service until they didn't anymore. And now we see Uber, Lyft, and other providers like that who have come in and really disrupted that industry. And it's because they have focused on the experience of how they deliver their service, which is on-demand transportation. And there are lots of case studies that look into that. But what we believe is that the experience is where they have really started to win out. It's also an evolution. The evolution of the experience is ongoing, right? And customers have seen an evolution of increasingly personal and increasingly dynamic experiences. They now expect to have interactions with artificial intelligence. They expect to see things that are focused on them personally and contextual to where they are in the world and in their customer journey. They expect that, and that expectation is only going to increase as we have additional adoption rates on smart technology. So the new expectation is reflected here on the right? Like we have some industry feedback. They could provide more detailed information on what days in the month I use more electric and tell me what I could do to keep my usage lower. More social media options, show energy use usage as it's being used. Just those three things are talking about multi-channel, but also being responsive to the customer's behavior and to give them actionable information. That means we need to know them. And when we are often working on personalization programs, we like to position this as know me, show me. Know who I am and the services that I'm getting from you, and then show me how those services are a benefit to me on an ongoing basis and introduce new services that would be relevant to me. So the new measuring stick really is, are your digital experiences as good as other loved brands, right? Like I started this talk off with a reference to Apple, Nike, Tesla. Those are all brand experiences that are setting the standard. And now utilities are having to adjust to that as well. Our customers expect the same level of service and recognition from our utilities as they do from more consumer brands. Because disruption's here. The experience is the solution. Now, that's where we see the ability to create a competitive edge and to maintain that competitive edge regardless of industry. Again, if we go back to our concept that companies that are loved win, that's what this is all about. If you like working with a company, you're more likely to continue working with that company even when other competition comes into play. And so this is where we see the real opportunity here for utilities to up their game. And again, if we're talking about a personalized adaptive experience, that's talking about personalized adaptive content, making sure that information that's being served up to our customers is relevant to them throughout their journey. It's how we're being judged, all of us. The customer experience really, though, is the safeguard against that disruption. It's not just a question of having the right technology. We can invest in the systems. We need to have a process in place that allows us to get the most out of those systems. And that's really about understanding the customer so deeply that you can give them that personalized, seamless, predictive experience in every channel they choose. Again, we saw a reference a couple slides back to one of the customers saying, look, I want more options to communicate via social media. They want it via text message. They want it across whatever medium is most convenient for them. And so that means things are getting very complex very quickly, and we need to have a plan in place to address that. So what do we do? Well, let's start by looking at the J.D. Power's top 16. We have the 4 regions: the East region, the Midwest region, the South region, and the West, right? And these are the top 4 in each of those regions, a mix of their large utilities and their medium-sized utilities, but these are really the top in each region. And what makes them different? Well, the highest ranking utilities make it easier to do business with them by offering customers online account management tools and products that drive cost savings. That's the main takeaway. But if you dig a little bit deeper, they also show that they're creating more personalized experiences for those customers. And again, it's about understanding what the customer wants and what their tasks are that they're trying to accomplish, and providing the right path and the right information for them to be able to do that. It's all about knowing what your customer wants, right? It's imperative that utility companies stay up to date regarding their customers' needs and expectations. Well, that's where content strategy comes in, because that's the whole point of content strategy, is knowing who our customer is, understanding what piece of information we have that's going to be valuable to them and that's going to help them accomplish tasks, discover new products and services from us, and maintain an ongoing positive relationship. So what I want to talk about now is applying the principles of content strategy to increase that customer satisfaction. So backing up a little bit, there is an industry definition. I, again, started in this industry in 1999, and things were just starting to take shape. We now have a real discipline formed around content strategy, which includes industry definitions. At the top line, we have content strategy guides the creation, delivery, and governance of useful, usable content. That's simple. That makes sense. It's about creating content. It's about getting it out there. It's about making sure we have a process in place to govern that content so that we don't start to spin off in 100 different directions. But it's got to be usable content, useful. That means getting the right content to the right people in the right place at the right time. Again, we have to make decisions in the content that we're creating and how we're distributing that content. Otherwise, it's very easy to overwhelm our users, which means we're going to lose those users. And then content strategy is an integrated set of user-centered, goal-driven choices about content throughout its life cycle. Life cycle here is doing a lot of heavy lifting because, yes, we're talking about the customer life cycle, the different points in the experience where they're engaging with us as a brand. And it's important to understand that context changes throughout that journey, but it's also important to understand that the content itself has a life cycle. You know, many of the clients that we work with, especially utilities that have had websites now 15 plus years, tend to have a lot of content online, and it's because they haven't kind of thought through what the end of that content life cycle should look like. What happens to content once it's out of date or once it's no longer accurate? Do we just leave it online for our customers to potentially find and then be served up with that out of date and potentially inaccurate information? Or do we have a process in place to ensure that all of the content that we have out there is relevant, is accurate, and is timely? So what is content? I love to start any conversation around content strategy with this question. In client meetings, this is where we get the most interesting answers. And the most common answer is, well, it's copy. It's the words, which is true. It is the words. Copy is obviously a key part of any content strategy. Those are the words that we're communicating. But I also like to think about it in the context of a film. What's the content of a film? Is it just the dialogue that we hear the characters relaying to each other on the screen, or is there more? Is there more communicated? Is there something in the imagery that the director chooses to focus on, the angles of the shot, the score of the film? All of those decisions play into creating an overall experience and communicating something to the viewer. When we're thinking about the content of our websites and other digital properties, yes, we're talking about the words, but really we're talking about anything that communicates a message or value to the customer. When they see an image on a page, that's communicating something to them. It's setting a tone and it's providing a message to them. So we want to make sure that all of those elements are in support of very specific goals, the user's goals and our business goals. The other kind of key takeaway from when I start these conversations is people think that content strategy is a thing, a deliverable, something that we just kind of drop on their desk. Here's your content strategy, have at it. And the reality is, yes, there are deliverables as a part of a content strategy, but really it's about a plan. We want to have a plan in place. We want to have a system in place and a process to ensure that your limited resources are being applied in the most effective way. And so we kind of think of it like a battle plan, right? We only have so many resources. We only have so many hours in the day. We want to make sure that those resources are applied effectively. Well, is this what we're looking at here, a battle plan, or is it a map? And so when we're talking about content strategy, yes, there are deliverables. There are things that we deliver that help us to enact and execute our plan. Sorry, 1 second here. But the real important thing is that we have a system in place that allows us to enact that plan. One moment. There we go. Okay. Oh, now my presentation is frozen. 1 sec, I'll restart here. There we go. Apologies. Okay, so let's talk about some of the tools that we use, because there are tools that we put in place. And we start with, because we've been talking so much about understanding who the customer is, it's important to have a documentation of who that customer is. And we focus heavily on personas. Now, I think a lot of clients in the past have maybe been burned on their investment in personas, and it's because those personas turned out to be mostly fictional. And when I talk about a persona, and when we at Connective DX talk about personas, we're talking about a creative expression of actual marketing data, of actual customer data. So instead of taking the reams of information and research that we have on a customer and dropping it on our designer's desk or our copywriter's desk or our content strategist's desk, we create personas, which again is just a creative expression. It's something that you can consume very easily and quickly. It's at a glance. But what's important here to understand is that we think about 4 things in consideration of that persona. It's not that I just that I have a persona and I know who that customer is. I need to know some very specific things. I need to know the customer's mindset. What are they thinking at different points in the journey? I also need to know their motivations. What is getting them to take action in the first place, to start this journey? What is it they're trying to do? What are their roadblocks? So where are the points of friction within the customer journey where they're having difficulty getting things done? And are there things that we can do? Is there information we can provide, or are there exit paths that we can provide that help them navigate those roadblocks? And then the last one is the content consumption habit. I like to refer back to a telecom client that I had several years ago who had a video producer on site whose real philosophy was that video can solve all problems. Anything that the customer is trying to solve, let's make a video for it. And video certainly has a place in our communication tool belt. But we have to think about what the customer is trying to do and the context that they're in to decide what's the best tool to apply. So back to this example, we were working on their service section of the site, so where people were coming to solve problems. And about 9 out of 10 of those problems could be solved with 3 to 5 bullet points. It was things like how to reset your modem. And the reality is that you unplug your modem, plug it back in, try the reset button. There were 3 bullet points. So don't make me watch a 5-minute, highly produced video when 3 bullets will do. So we have to be cognizant of what's the best way to deliver this information in context of the customer's experience. Again, if we're focused on the service part of a site, people are going to that part of the site because something isn't working, or they need information on a product they already have. So we need to deliver that very quickly and help them get over that task and on to the next task, and hopefully introduce them to some other products and services that we have. So we take that persona and then we want to map out their journey. What does it look like when they're engaging with us or with any type of utility or service? And what are the different steps that they take? What I think is important to understand from the example that I have here is, we have these green and red dots, and then we have a line that they kind of hover back and forth across. And what that really represents is the mindset of the customer. So when they're in a green zone, they're generally positive. They're feeling good about their decision. They're feeling good about their experience. The red dots are where they're running into friction and where they're experiencing roadblocks. And so understanding that will help us to figure out, okay, if at this point in the experience, we know that it's a point of friction, can I help this person get through that piece of friction by providing a piece of information? Sometimes that piece of information is actually just setting them up for the information that they need to have. If I need my social security number to be able to set up a new account, let's set that expectation at the beginning of the experience so that they can gather all the documents they need and be ready when they get to that point. That helps to ease that friction point. Likewise, if they're in a positive zone, that might be a time to engage them to become an advocate for us, or to introduce a new product or service. Again, back to the example I was talking about before, in addition to having a video producer, we also had a sales director who really wanted to push a promotion at every opportunity. And when we're looking in the service area, where again people are there because they were experiencing some sort of a problem that they're trying to fix, let's fix that problem before we introduce them to another product, and ensure that they feel positive about the brand and the experience. We're going to have a much better adoption rate if we do that after we've solved the problem for them than before. And so really mapping out the experience and understanding the mindset is all about building empathy for our customers and understanding what they're trying to do, and then figuring out the ways that we can help them. So this process informs a lot of things, right? It helps us to understand what are the feature upgrades we need to create. So is there new technology we need to invest in? Are there new features we need to create? There are also brand opportunities. There are ways for us to be able to show that we're a good partner to them. We're not just a service provider. We want to help them with their day and make sure that if they're a business, that they're up and running and continuing to make money. If they're a local customer or person, that their home is still heated and comfortable. That's a way for us to build a relationship, again, by understanding where our customer is and what they're thinking. There are omni-channel alignment opportunities. So yes, things are getting complex. We have more and more channels all the time. So we want to make sure that we have a consistent and concise approach to all of those channels, because while we sometimes will think of them as separate channels that maybe even are run by different teams, to our customer, it's just another interaction point. It's just another touch point with the brand. And when we're thinking about brand, it's important to remember that every interaction we have, no matter how small, with a customer, is our opportunity to either make our brand promise or break it. And so we want to have alignment across all of our channels to ensure that we're continuing to make our brand promise to them. We also want to understand the technology constraints and opportunities. Again, from an agency perspective, the last thing I want to do is present a customer or a client with a concept that they fall in love with, only to find out that their technology can't support it, or that it would be too time consuming or expensive to be able to execute given their technology constraints. So as a content strategist, I want to know, what systems do I have to work with? What are the parameters around those systems? Are there opportunities we haven't even taken advantage of yet? Are there things that your CMS can do that you haven't even taken out of the box yet? All of which gives us a really good sense of what it is we have to work with and what is feasible. We always have to think about the resources that we have and the time that we have, and what's the best way that we can apply these tools. And then the last piece is the content needs. By understanding all of these touch points and what it is that a customer is trying to do and where they're running into trouble, that tells me exactly what kind of content I need to surface at that time. It also helps us to kind of navigate some of the internal debates that we might have when we have competing interests. Again, back to the sales director who wanted to throw a promo in at every opportunity. We have to be able to align whatever we're doing back to a strategy, back to what it is our customers are trying to do. And so, yes, I want to help sell products and services as well. And I want to make sure that it's done at the most opportune time, not at the time where we might potentially actually aggravate our customer. So one of the tools that we use, and I'm going to walk through, I think, 3 of these, it's kind of an evolving set here, is a core content model. This is from a List Apart, which is a website I love. This is a tool I love. It's a great way, especially in stakeholder meetings or when you have like your internal stakeholders gather around trying to figure out what you're going to do. This is a great place to start, because what we do is we identify what the page is. What page are we even talking about? Are we talking about the About Us page? Are we talking about start, and change service page? And then we focus on 2 aspects. What are our goals as a business? What are we trying to do? What are our objectives? Sometimes it's going to be, we need to promote this new product or service. And so this is a promotional opportunity. Great, that's good to know. That's what I want to focus on. But I also want to understand what the user tasks are. So when a user comes to this content, what are they trying to do? I need to find the bridge between the business goals and the user tasks so that we can help our customers do what they're trying to do in support of our business objectives. But none of this happens in a vacuum. None of our customers turn on their computer and automatically land on this page. So we want to understand the inward paths. Where are they coming from? And what expectations were set at the beginning of this experience? The most common kind of way to think about this is if we have a campaign that's running and maybe we have some banner ads that are out there. What expectation was set in that ad? Because I want to make sure that the core content of this page is meeting those expectations, exceeding those expectations, and then setting the customer up for the next step, which is the forward path. After they've consumed this information and they want to do something, what is it they should do next? And what is the path that we can provide them to do that? Nothing I think drives a content strategist more crazy than to find that maybe we have a blogging team out there who's creating articles that are fantastic and getting all kinds of traction and all kinds of attention. And at the end of the article, there's no call to action. There's nowhere for the customer to go next. And so they click out of it and they go away. And we had their attention. So I want to understand what the forward paths are and make sure that they're aligned to our business goals. So what is it we want them to do as a business next, but also what they want to do as a customer next. The next level of detail is something we call a page description diagram. And you'll see some kind of common pieces here from the core model. Again, we start with the mindset. We want to understand what it is the customer's trying to do. Again, we document our page goals. So in this case, we want to make it easy for customers to complete the intended tasks, surprise them with new information that's relevant and engaging, and we want to project ourselves in a distinct way for the user, again, showing that we're a good partner. But we pull all this together to really get to the meat of the page. And before we start sketching anything out, before we start designing anything from a visual perspective, I want to make sure that we have an outline of the content, of the information that needs to be on that page. Not only is that going to ensure that the pages that we're creating are in support of our business objectives, it makes our lives easier when we're working with our creative team because they know exactly what they have to design against. There are no surprises here. And so using a process like this really speeds along our design system, our design process, and gets us lots of efficiencies. But you can see we've got headline and intro that's aligned to the image. So the image needs to support what it is that we're focused on this particular page, and that we ensure that we have a call to action that leads the customer, again, to the next step. What is the next thing they need to do? And how do we ensure they have a path to get there? There are lots of studies that are showing how top-level navigation is really a fallback, right? If we think about how most of our customers are getting to our website, they start at Google or Yahoo or some other search engine. And if that search engine is doing its job right and our page is optimized correctly, they land specifically on the page with the most relevant information to their search term. And if we get them to that point, I want to make sure that I have those exit points for them to get them to the next step so they don't have to rely on the top-level navigation. Page-level navigation is a key component of a good content strategy, and how we ensure we have that is through a process like this. And then the kind of the deepest level of detail that we get into as part of this modeling process is to have what's essentially an annotated wireframe. And again, this is just an example. This isn't a real page, but the key points to really focus on are, again, we have our customer mindset, our key tasks, our business objectives across the top. And then for every element that's on this page, every single piece of information needs to have a strategic rationale. Why is it there? And what is it there to do? If we have a piece of information in one of our wireframes or sketches that we don't have a strategic rationale for, we should really think twice about whether that piece of information needs to be there. Does it have any business being there if we can't really tell you how it supports the customer mindset, the key tasks, or the business objectives? If it doesn't have a strategic rationale, it's a distraction. It's a distraction to the user, and it's actually distracting from our key business goals. So ensuring that every piece of information has a strategic rationale is really the first step of what we call a nested content model. So again, define the purpose and the rationale for every piece of information. The next layer of that is the UX layer, and we start to get into that with wireframing, where we define the behaviors of the component. So when a customer engages with this piece of information, how does it respond? What does it do? If it's a video player, how does it react? If it's an interactive infographic, how is it supposed to change when the customer provides new information to it? So we start to define that in the next layer. All of which leads to the third layer, which is our technical requirements of a component. Again, this is all about efficiency. This is going to speed our development process. If we have all of this documented, our development partners won't have questions or won't guess as to how this thing is supposed to actually work. They'll have it all documented together, and they'll also have the strategic understanding of how this thing works, which helps them to be part of the problem solving. You know, I rely on our dev leads day in and day out to help me understand, well, what is it that we could do with the technology that would make this easier for the user? They will understand that better than I will. And so I want to make sure that they have all the information they can to be a really helpful partner in that process. Content audits are something that content strategists are really well known for, and I think they're also one of the things that are most misunderstood. So when I started in the industry back in '99, again, a content audit was essentially an inventory. We would really just kind of document all of the content that we had. And as my career progressed and as I worked with more and more clients, it felt to me like that was kind of a lost opportunity if that's all we're doing is inventory, doing an inventory of the content. What I want to really do and what I really need to know is how to analyze that content. So it's great that I have this inventory, but I need to know how that content's performing against our business objectives and our user objectives. So we start by defining the needs. How we create those business objectives are through stakeholder interviews, just talking to our business partners, understanding what they're trying to do. We have our customer objectives through the personas and the customer journeys. But in regulated industries, we have another layer. I want to make sure as a content strategist, I know all of the regulatory and the compliance requirements that go into how we're communicating about anything on the website. Because again, what I don't want to do is come up with a great concept, have the client love it, and then have it get nixed in legal or in compliance because it didn't meet their requirements. I need to know that up front. So again, we know the size of the box that we have to work within. But then I'm going to identify a sample to evaluate against the criteria that comes out of those needs that we defined. And again, because most of the clients that we work with are on large scale sites, tens of thousands of pages, almost nobody is doing a comprehensive content audit. It would be too time consuming and too expensive. So what I want to do is a sampling. And I start by identifying the high value content and the high volume content. Now the high volume content we identify through analytics. So if we have pieces of the website that people are going to in high volumes, I want to know about it because I want to know what's in that part of the website that's drawing all of these people. How are they interacting with that content? Where are they going next? But that doesn't tell us everything. From our stakeholder interviews, I'm going to identify what the high value content is. I think all of us have experienced a time where we've put something out there that is very important to the organization, and it kind of falls flat. It's not being found. It's not being used. So if I just look at the high volume, I'm going to miss out on all of those pieces of information that I know are valuable to the organization that for some reason just haven't been getting the traffic that we needed to. I also want to understand why it's not getting that traffic. So by looking at those two sides of the coin, we have a good understanding of how our content is performing. I also want to look at anything that's in support of current programs or current campaigns that are out there, because that's where we're investing good money. I want to make sure that we have content that's in support of those campaigns and programs. And then any, again, required information. What are we legally required to, or from a brand perspective, we're required to communicate to our customers? I want to make sure that we are in alignment with those requirements. The last piece here is where we compile and analyze. So again, Yes, I work in spreadsheets, and for content strategists, that's interesting and exciting. For our stakeholders, it's not. They don't have time to dig through all of the minutiae. So what I want to do is catalog our findings and synthesize that into observations and insights. And those are two different things. Observations are what we see. We've looked at your content, and here are things that we see going on. But the insight is, and here's what we think it means, and where we think there are opportunities, and where we think we should invest our time and resources to make some changes. So think of the observations as the what, and the insights as the so what, right? It's what we saw, and then it's what we think we should do about it. The last piece here is I need to identify trends in the content, because when we're talking about working with large organizations, I want to make changes at scale. We're not talking about making individual page level changes generally. I want to make wide scale changes across content that cover multiple lines of business, multiple audiences. So we're looking for trends in the content, and what that looks like as part of a report is something like this. So we have in the top left, this is from another client. We have our target persona, Wendy. I want to understand her goals. We see her pain points. We also have her defining characteristics. What's she like? And also, what are the products that she's currently using, and how often is she using it? From there, I'm going to be very clear and concise in what the business needs are, what her pain points are. But then that last column is, how does our product meet her business needs or alleviate her pain points? Because that's going to help me to focus our messaging, which goes to the top right. So see, these are the themes that came out of our recommendations for how to update their content. We're going to focus clearly on the benefits. We're going to provide a clear reason to use our product. We're going to cast our product as a great marketing solution, right? And it's because we saw that most of the competitors out there were focused on the details of their product. Well, the details of their product were the same details as our product. There wasn't much differentiation between what we were providing and what a competitor was providing. So what we're going to do is we're going to shift to what the benefits of those details are, those product details. So the takeaway there is, when we look at our content, we want to apply the same criteria to our competitors. We want to see, how are they meeting these needs, and where are there opportunities for us to do something different? The reality is, not all communications are created equally, right? Sometimes we're just providing instructions on how to do something. Sometimes we're just providing information to a customer. There are transactional times. They're paying a bill. And it used to be, sometimes I'd work with teams that would say, well, we don't need a content strategist. This is just a transactional website. Well, a transaction still requires communication, right? We want to make sure that we're very clear in what's involved in this transaction. And again, we want to be able to be very clear in what happens after the transaction. What's the next step the customer should take? We also want to maintain good relationships with our customers. This is all about creating a company that is loved, and a company that is loved wins, right? So we want to maintain a good relationship with our customers. These things are handled slightly differently, and we want to be cognizant of what context we're in. Are we providing instructions, or are we helping to facilitate a transaction? That's going to help us to focus on the messaging. And then, of course, especially in the utilities industry, we have urgent messaging. And I'm going to walk us through a brief case study. You can read more of the details on this. We'll email out a link to the blog post that I posted last week on this particular incident, which I lived through. So I'm, giving this webinar from Michigan, where I live, and I lead the content strategy practice here from Grand Rapids, Michigan. But there's an actual city called Hell, Michigan, and the newscasters love to make fun of that and use that in their headlines. But the truth is, it really did freeze over at the end of January. Temperatures were dropping to record lows, and so we got lots of headlines like this. It was 9 below in Detroit, and also in Hell. And Michigan asked folks to lower their heat, and they did. And so this is a case study of having a multi-channel, multi-content type content approach. And the the really important thing here is that they were consistent in their messaging. They provided actionable information. So they told us exactly, here's what we need you to do, here's when we need you to do it, and if you do, here are the benefits. And the real benefit was that we had a station that had caught fire, a compressor station that had caught fire. And so to alleviate stress on the system, they were asking everybody to lower their heat to 65, which again, while we were hitting record lows, that seemed inconsistent with our expectations. But because they were able to explain the story, and again, across multiple channels in a very consistent way, they actually got everybody to lower their temps. It actually worked. And the benefit, of course, being that we did not have any outages. They were able to put the fire out and get the system back up running quickly and efficiently. So one way that allows us to be able to respond to urgent situations, because we all have a lot going on in a day. Just a regular work day is a busy day. So when something urgent comes up, how do we ensure that we have the flexibility to be able to do our work right and to be able to be consistent and concise in our messaging? Well, one way is using a content calendar. And there's lots of information online about using content calendars that you can find. But here's how I use content calendars for utilities. And we really have 4 inputs. The 4 inputs are we could apply to any industry, but when we're talking about the utility industry, we have some kind of specific and unique needs. So we think about the marketing perspective. What is it that we're trying to promote at any given time? Do we have an energy reduction program that we're pushing, or a winterization program that we're pushing? I want to know that and make sure that it's accounted for. Are there new products and services that we're putting out into the market that we want to be able to focus on? Are there cyclical events? Every calendar has cyclical events in it. We know that Christmas comes every year, back to school, summer, winter. So let's document those. At the high level, yes, things like seasons, but also at a smaller level or a more micro level. Are there things within our industry that could be important to our customers to know? This helps us to be able to map out our content in advance. And the further that we can get ahead of something, the more time we have for flexibility later when an urgent matter comes up, right? The last input are audience insights. And this is where I urge everybody, if you're not already very good friends with your analytics team and your social media team, if they're part of a different team, make friends with them, because they have ongoing real-time information about the audience, about what pieces of information they're responding to, how they're responding to it, if they're sharing information, and also how they're talking about it. When an incident happens, how are the customers talking about that incident, so that when we go to respond to them, we're using the same language and we're on the same level with them. So the key takeaways here is it helps to establish publication and workflow cadence. We have a process, again, in place to be able to do our work. We can identify authors and reviewers for each piece of content, and more importantly, hold them accountable. We set deadlines, and we can say, can you commit to this? If they can't, we at least have some flexibility to be able to find somebody as a backup plan if a piece of content falls through. So again, the real value of a content calendar is to provide flexibility, provide some space for us to be able to respond and react. As an example, at the very highest level, this is what it might look like, right? So on a quarterly basis, we're looking at our marketing objectives, energy savings campaign. Our merchandising objective is the home energy checkup program that we're promoting at that particular time. Some cyclical events, our New Year's Day, the Valentine's Day is coming up, St. Patrick's Day, right? But more importantly, audience insight. We know that our customers are thinking about energy saving tips. They're curious about or researching how to report outages during an outage. And they're also thinking about winterizing. So we want to be able to align our home energy checkup system to this audience insight that they're interested in winterizing at this time. So those are the tools that we have to work with in content strategy, and some of the thinking that goes into them. Again, I think if I were to leave you with one kind of key takeaway, it's to understand again that content strategy is not just a thing that gets delivered, but it's a process. And part of that process is not just understanding what content we have, but also what resources we have to be able to distribute and manage that content, so we can have our teams correctly allocated against our needs. So I think we have time for questions. Jake, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct, Eric. Thank you so much. So we have a few questions here, and there may be time for more if any last-minute questions come up. The first question we have is, what are some common issues you find in a content audit?
Yeah, so I do lots of content audits. I'm in the middle of one right now. And the most common issue that we find is generally surprising to the clients, actually. And it's that, by and large, they have the content they need. They have a lot of information, and it's good information. So they tend to have a good kind of core source of content. Where they're falling down often is in the execution, because they haven't applied some of these principles. So they may have really important information locked inside of a PDF, or even if it's on a web page, it's buried within dense body copy. And so if we understand that, look, a customer's here to accomplish these two tasks, and the answer to those two tasks is in this body copy, well, let's pull it out into bullet points, or let's make sure that it's a pull quote, some way to highlight that we have this information, it's right here for you, and that they can easily consume it. So the biggest takeaway is generally that the clients already have the content they need. It's just not being delivered in the most effective way.
Excellent. Let's see. The next question is, how do you navigate competing interests or people fighting over real estate on a page?
That's my favorite question, because that's kind of at the core of content strategy. It's the real value of content strategy. So, if we have agreement all the way back to our models, right, where I said that every piece of information on a page has a strategic rationale. Well, we don't just decide that in a vacuum. We decide that with our stakeholders, and we have them agree, yeah, that's exactly what we're trying to do with this page. That piece of information is the best piece of information to accomplish that need. Now we have agreement on what we're trying to do. And what content strategy really does is to help mitigate some of the subjective debates that we have. It's not, well, I think this is important, or I think the best way for us to do this is X. We align it back to specific business objectives, specific customer needs, and then have agreement on our rationale. Yes, this is why we're doing what we're doing. I think the other kind of important part of that, though, is especially from an agency and client relationship, you're not going. We want to make sure that we have a system in place that allows you to maintain that experience and optimize that experience over time. And so having the page description diagrams where we have our rationale very clearly defined helps to maintain that experience ongoing, because you can always go back to, like, wait, why did we do it this way? Oh, that's right. It's documented right here, and it tells you exactly not only why we made that decision, but what specifically that decision is there to support. And so I feel like that's how we tend to mitigate most of those conversations.
Yeah, that sounds like a good strategy, assuming that the highest paid person in the negotiation is reasonable.
Well, again, that's why it's always about an agreement, and we go back, and at least we've got something that we can refer back to.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, last question. What's the difference between? Oh, I like this one. What's the difference between content marketing and content strategy? I hear both terms used all the time.
Oh, yeah. So I love this one too, because it just opens a whole can of worms. So I'll try to be short and brief. The reality is that content marketing is just that. It's a marketing activity, and it's important. And we see more and more value in creating content in support of our marketing activities. But the reality is not every interaction with our customer is an opportunity for marketing. And not every piece of content that we create is a marketing asset. Sometimes, again, we're being informational or we're supporting a transaction. And so the difference is that the content strategy ensures that we understand the purpose of all of the content that we're creating. Sometimes it's marketing, sometimes it's transactional, sometimes it's informational, but that we have a very clear understanding of the purpose of all of that content so that our content marketing activities can align to that strategy and be in support of that strategy. So I see content marketing as essentially an output of a clearly defined content strategy.
Excellent. Well, with that, Derek, I'd like to thank you for this fabulous presentation, great information, and for answering these questions. Linda Carizdio for producing this event and doing a great job of promoting it. And to all of you who joined us today, thanks for taking time out of your undoubtedly very busy schedules to hang out with us. We look forward to talking with you again in the future, and we will send a follow-up email with a link to the video on YouTube when it becomes available. Thanks, and have a great day.
Thanks, Jake.